Everybody, welcome to Vinyl Fetish. We're back up here in the Vinyl Attic for doing what we're calling not the countdown or the count up, but the count through 100 albums that should be in your collection. 100 really great things that are kind of not the main things that everybody talks about. We really want to highlight some of the lesser known pieces of plastic that we love, or at least that I love. And we are going into a genre that we haven't been to yet, and I'm shocked, but it won't be the first time that we are going to talk about some hip-hop on vinyl. Hip-hop on vinyl, specifically a record that has been sort of lionized over the years, has gained much more respect and attention, which doesn't happen a lot with rap records. Rap records tend to be very frozen in the moment, and they sound very dated, 6 minutes later. This is an album that has grown in stature. In fact, Time Magazine added it to their 100 greatest albums of all time list, and it is certainly in mine. We're going to 1989, July 25th, 1989, the release of Paul's Boutique by the Beastie Boys. This is a great record to talk about for several reasons. The music and what it represents, the moment in time it represents, what it tells us about 1989, what it tells us about now. So let's talk about Paul's Boutique. This is their second album. The first album was Licensed to Ill, comes out in late 86, and is a huge hit. Party for Your Right, Fight for Your Right to Party is all over the place. It's kind of characterized as sort of white boy rap, frat boy rap, party rap. It's produced by Rick Rubin, who did a lot of hip-hop and metal stuff before this. I mean, he certainly has his street cred, but it was seen as a little bit of a novelty. Even though it had 7 singles and was huge, it was sort of like this white guys jumping on the hip-hop train in the late 80s, and they were going to be a flash in the pan, and their silliness was going to go away because it wasn't serious about what hip-hop is supposed to be about in the late 1980s. And it was also kind of infused with a certain amount of sexism, I guess we could call it, or misogyny. It was about boys. It was very frat boy. When you think frat boys, you think misogyny. They kind of go hand in hand, I'm afraid. In fact, I saw them on that tour in 1987 at the Civic Center Expo Center, and in the middle of the set, a giant, probably 50-foot penis erupted from the stage. A giant penis. Yay! They also had a cage for women to dance in. In fact, what they would do is find a local female wherever they were playing in town and convince her to be their dancing girl. In Atlanta, they convinced a friend of mine named Cy Davis to be the girl in the cage. We were very surprised to see her there. And then they basically kidnapped her. They took her to Kentucky and they told her, "You're going to be the girl in the cage now," against her wishes. She had to get a bus home, and she wasn't very happy about that. So the Beastie Boys were not known as progressive feminists, and were just sort of these party animals. So that sort of shtick kind of got to them, and they pulled back after the first album and tried to figure out what are the next steps. And they kind of, they're from New York, and they sort of hunkered down in L.A., Ad Rock, MCA, and Mike D., where they ran into the Dust Brothers, who are these great producers from Delicious Vinyl Records, worked with Tone Loc, worked with this really great Booyah Tribe record that I'm going to show you. Booyah Tribe. This is a lost gem in hip-hop history, Dust Brothers production. And the Dust Brothers basically had an album almost completed. They were just working on this idea of sampling, and sampling was their sort of shtick. If you know Tone Loc, like Funky Cold Medina and that type of stuff, that they were working their craft and putting together an album built on obscure samples and rock samples and things like that. And the Beastie Boys basically said, "This is our next record. We want something that is more contextual, more complex, more deep, more layers to it. Can we work together and make this the second Beastie Boys album?" So they did a lot of this work. Mainly at Mike Dyke's, the founder of Delicious Vinyl Records, apartment. They recorded in his apartment. They did some of it at the record plant, but basically they were hunkered down in L.A. in Mike Dyke's apartment, putting this record together. And sampling was becoming sort of the sound of hip hop in the late 80s. I mean, the record that really informs Paul's Boutique is a year earlier, the Public Enemy album, It Takes a Nation of Millions to Hold Us Back. And that was so rich in samples, mean, I remember getting it as soon as it came out, sitting in my apartment in Atlanta with my roommate Ed Santos, and just going through not every song, every sample. Oh, that's a drum beat from James Brown, Funky Drummer. Oh, that's a sample of Malcolm X. So that's like archaeologists kind of going through and trying to figure out what each piece of this masterpiece was. And so that was sort of building and building and building. And so Paul's Boutique comes out the following summer, the July of 1989, and is there's a lot of confusion about what to do with it, what to make of it. I mean, first of all, let's kind of talk about the music. There are over 200. It's estimated there will be between 200 and 300 samples on this record. I'll include a link in the description below about some of the data mining that people have done to try to locate what every single drum beat is. There's some really obvious stuff like the Beatles. There's a great using the end from Abbey Road as a rhythm. The Eagles, Them Shoes pops up. That Curtis Mayfield beat. that Curtis Mayfield beat on Eggman is just a great sample groove. And then there's tons of more obscure things, including stuff, from the rock world. There's a little bit of Paul McCartney drum beat in there from the McCartney album, which I remember hearing going like, I know that drum beat. Where do I know that from? And Led Zeppelin, some Pink Floyd, including weird Pink Floyds like screams and weird piano chords. You've got everything from Ofer Haza, the Israeli singer, to Drew Barrymore in E.T. Her scream is in there. I mean, it's literally so dense and so rich. There's just so many layers of sound. The Ramones, Susie's the Headbanger, pops up at a random moment. I mean, there's just like Sly and the Family Stone. There's just drum, you hear a drum beat off a Joni Mitchell record. There's for a moment, and then, there's just so much going on, and it was so rich. And this record, when it came out, was kind of the definitive embodiment of sampling, because everything sort of changed shortly after that. Right after this record came out, there was a lawsuit for a Biz Markie record. Biz Markie had a great record called Alone Again. You can't find it because it rips off Alone Again Naturally by Gilbert O'Sullivan, the early 70s hit. There was a big lawsuit. There had been a couple lawsuits. Steely Dan sued De La Soul, I remember. And all of a sudden, the licensing to get samples became not cost effective, became extremely expensive. That all of a sudden, to get all the clearance to play all these bits and pieces, you had to pay money. I mean, I have been sampled. I have to say, this is a weird thing for me to say, but I have been sampled. I'm on an Eminem track. I'm on an Eminem track from 2004's Encore album, a track called Yellow Brick Road. Listen to that song and you'll hear my voice at the beginning. And they called me up and asked me, can we have your permission? And what I didn't know at the time is I could have asked for a whole bunch of money to say, yes, you can use my voice on your record. I didn't know, so what I did is I asked for 2 autographed copies, one for me and one for my nephew, and tickets to his show when he came to town. And that was it. But I could ask for a lot of money. It was already in the record. Oh well. I can say I'm on an Eminem record. I've been sampled. Sample that. And sampling, of course, is still around. I mean, we still have it. Just think about Doja Cat and how she recently sampled Dionne Warwick's Walk On By. I ain't said what they said. I'd rather be famous instead. Oh, she's a rebel. She's a devil. So, the sampling is still around, but not like it was on this record. This record was a behemoth of sampling. So much to listen to, so many layers. And it just, nobody had heard anything like it before. There was just so much going on every single track. But there's another thing about this record that we're talking about, which is this question, is it a white person's record? And what I mean by that is hip-hop is not new in mining black culture for white people. I mean, if we go back to Elvis Presley and the white guy that sang the blues, and there's a long history of white artists ripping off black artists. The black artists invent a music form, and then white artists, Pat Boone or whoever, take it and make the money, and the people that create it get nothing. And so there is this this weird thing about this record, because the references on it. So if you think about hip hop in 1989, this was the rise of gangster rap. NWA, straight out of Compton, was huge. This is the and Ice-T and kind of all that stuff. This is the rise of political rap, groups like Public Enemy. Chuck D would call hip-hop CNN for black people. The rise of Afrocentric hip-hop, like De La Soul and Tribe Called Quest, and a lot of the stuff that was KRS-One. And then here was this band of white kids that were singing things or rapping things that were kind of for a white audience. I mean, we're talking rhyming Alfred E. Newman and Harry S. Truman, or saying, I got more stories than JD's got Salinger, or I'm chilling like Bob Dylan. We're talking about Dick Buttkiss. I mean, these are a lot of white references. I'm like Sam the Butcher bringing Alice the Meat. I mean, Brady Bunch is pretty white. And so there was this weird thing about this record, like, can I glom onto it? Can I claim it? And for me, in 1989, I was a huge hip-hop fan. And let's just be clear, in 1989, we got 10 years, right? We got 10 years from Sugar Hill Gang to the Beastie Boys album. We got 10 years of this incredible thing that starts in the South Bronx and innovators 50 years ago, like DJ Kool Herc, creating this music for black and brown people that is now becoming wider and wider, and now is, the global phenomenon that it is. And I was in Atlanta, which was a center, the dirty, dirty South, of a lot of hip-hop coming out of Atlanta. Arrested Development was a big act at the time. And it felt like this was a record for me. It felt like some of these references were. And the reason I didn't feel bad about it is because it's incredibly referential to all the hip-hop pioneers of the past. The way that it's sampled, the way that it shouts out. Public Enemy not only gets a sample, they got me in a so. They get a shout out on the record, and there is lots of love and reference and reverence for the black artist to pave the way for the Beastie Boys to be able to do this. So it didn't feel like a ripoff. It felt like a chapter in the hip hop story that happened to be told by these white guys who were bringing this music to a wider audience that had to be mostly white kids in the suburbs and douchebags in frat houses that were hearing this music for the first time. There's even a reference to Donald Trump on this record, on Johnny Royale, Donald Trump, Donald Tramp. And it's not kind to Donald Trump, so thank you, Beastie Boys, for being ahead of the curve on that one. But yeah, find the reference to Donald Trump on Paul's Boutique. There's still some sexism on this record. There's still a lot about the girls, the getting the girls, the Rapunzel, let down your hair so I can climb up and get in your underwear. I shouldn't laugh. Woke up with a 1-ton hoe. A 1-ton hoe. That's a big hoe. So there's, some of that misogyny is still there. But they're starting to move away from it. The cover, the packaging is brilliant. This is one of the reasons you need this on vinyl, because look at this gatefold. This is a neighborhood in Louisiana, in the Lower East Side of Manhattan. And Paul's Boutique is not an actual place. It's just really incredible how they did this. But this square is now called, as of last fall, 2023, Beastie Boys Square, because of, I can imagine. I mean, I've been to Lower East Side many times, and I've been tempted to go to that corner and see what it looks like now. But Ludlow Street on the Lower East Side of Manhattan. When this record came out, it didn't really make a big splash in terms of the charts. The single, Hey Ladies, did make it up the charts somewhat, made it to a 38 on the Billboard charts, which is a pretty big deal. It was on both the rap charts and the rock charts for a single, which that had never happened before. The follow-up single, Shadrach, was a brilliant music video that I think Ad Rock did that was a staple on MTV. But one of the things that came out, or one of the sort of talking points when it came out, is its comparison to the Beatles. Part of it is because of the packaging, brilliant packaging. The label itself looks like a Capitol Records label. So I think even they were thinking Beatles. The Beatles are sampled more than once on this record, as is Paul McCartney. They were sued by the Beatles for their samples, which they took as a badge of honor. I remember them saying, look, we got sued by the Beatles. How cool is that? The Beatles sued us. But also the way the record's put together. And there's a suite of songs, of 9 songs, I think, on the second side called B-Boy Bouillabaisse. That's a bunch of short little songs all clipped together, kind of like the end of Abbey Road, like the medley that Paul would put together on Abbey Road. And it's all these great little bits. And as soon as you get into it, it switches to another song. It's very sort of White Album, Abbey Road-ish in that sense. And that had never happened before. That never really happened before. Over time, it started to gain respect. Started being appreciated as a moment. I mean, as I said, because of the lawsuits, the hip-hop couldn't repeat this. We couldn't have another record that was just hundreds and hundreds of samples. It would just be too expensive to do. So hip-hop had to go in other directions. They raised the bar, and then they moved away from the bar. I mean, it was just sort of where we went into the 90s was a much different place with regards to rap music. The Beastie Boys themselves evolved. You know, they started moving away from the sort of party themes, and, you know, they got involved in the Free Tibet movement. When Check Your Head came out in 1992, that was a much bigger record. And then Ill Communication in 94 was huge. I mean, that was the one with Sabotage, which was constantly on MTV, constantly, and you just heard it all the time. And by the mid-90s, the Beastie Boys are, you know, massively associated with youth culture and hip-hop. But at the time when this record came out, it was sort of out of left field because it was so different in its approach, the multi layers of sampling. I mean, you know, there is that thrill of discovering that sound that you haven't heard before. I mean, I've been playing this again. You know, most rap records are moments in time, so they don't age very well. So if you're listening to an LL Cool J record from 1986, it sounds like 1986, right? I mean, you sort of listen to it. If you listen to a Master P cassette tape from, you know, 1994, it sounds like 1994. Like, you just don't go back to these records a lot because there's always new stuff. This record grows over time, and there's always more to hear as your ears, you know, go deeper and deeper and deeper into the mix and pick up on all this amazing stuff. So it was really, there's really nothing like it. There's really nothing like it in hip-hop, in recorded music. Paul's Boutique. Okay, I wanted to spend some time with that great record. Coming up next, we've had a live record. We did Aretha live at the Fillmore. We got to talk about live rock albums. Live rock albums play a huge role in the history of vinyl. We could talk forever about Frampton Comes Alive, and maybe someday we will. But we're going to talk about an album from 1980, The Kinks live, One for the Road. Next on vinyl, Fetish. Man, this record matters. It sounds better now than it did then. It really matters. The Beastie Boys matter. I love what they've done in the world. You matter. Let's talk about it.